Welcome to this live tutorial on live bars with Krita. We are going to see how we can create that kind of UI element in Krita using its bitmap focus toolset. So the first step to do that, as always, is to look for references. I really invite you to go to websites like Pinterest or Behance. I use Pinterest personally, to find references from other professional artists. It's very easy. You just have to look for game UI or user interface. You see that you have a lot of recommendations in here. For instance, if I click on one of those keywords, it gets added to my search, and you can see that right now I get more RPG-oriented references. So for instance, you have an RPG in here, you have a puzzle game with really shiny elements in there. It's not easy to approach UI creation because it feels very geometrical, but in the end, in order to create polished UI, you need to be rigorous for one. You need to be very precise with your art, and you need to have a great artistic sense of lots of materials, because it's mostly the materials and the details that count. You can see that here we have triangles, circles, simple shapes like that, and it's really inside of those shapes we have some very delicate, precise shading, as we can see in here. So how do professional UI designers do that? It's very simple. Actually, they just look at existing material in nature. They look for metal, for wood, for gemstones, just like we have right here. So amber, for instance, is a beautiful kind of gemstone. We have blue amber with its more opaque look and very glossy finish. And one that I really love is the moonstone. So if you have a silver frame like on this picture with a, let's say, glossy bar with blue and shades of purple, for instance, to shade it, you can have some very convincing metabar. As you know by now, I use a software called PureRef that's free to organize my references. I'm going to copy that moonstone in here, and I have it here just to show you that this software is great because it allows me, I can copy any picture and paste it in here and place it wherever I want. I got all of these references from Pinterest, and I wanted to get a variety of styles from game artists in order to tell you a bit more about how things are made. Those geometrical types of bars, these come from the MMORPG WildStar, are best made with vector software and layer effects, in all honesty, because you need very precise shapes, and the shading is rather straightforward. It's very detailed, it's very polished, but it's pretty straightforward. However, an element like those jewels, those crystals, sorry, it can be made more accurately, I feel, with a toolset like Krita offers. It's mostly hand-painted in that case, because you can see that you have lots of details to add, and those are very hard to draw with vector software. It's better to do it with a digital painting package. And that's the kind of approach we are going to try to focus on. Okay, so in here, I have one more picture that I want to show you. It's this one, and it's really interesting. I got it from a Behance account. Those are kind of shading styles. They give you a sense of, ideas about how you could shade your bar, like the height of the shadow, for instance, and the kind of glossy finish or shape you can have for your lighting. The type of lighting as well, here coming from the top left, obviously, here coming from the top and the bottom, they all work pretty well. Some more diffuse lighting, some more glossy finish with a very sharp light, direct light. That's the kind of style you want to draw inspiration from, simply because it's very easy to dissect that way. You have to look out for the details, like this really soft highlight at the bottom in here, or this surrounding highlight on this one. But overall, it's a very good piece of reference. So in Krita, the first thing we have to do is to create our document. I invite you to make it pretty big, and the reason for that is we are working with bitmap tools, not vector. So if we want to scale our bar, if we want to transform it later on, we want to retain as many details as we can. And we want to be able to zoom in later in the process and to detail our bar, to add tiny highlights and stuff like that. So in order to do that, we need to have a good resolution. I'm going with 2048 times 1024 in here. In order to create our live bar, I'm going to first add a group, and everything about the live bar will go into that group. I'm adding a base layer in it, which I'm going to fill with a red color. This is our base diffuse color for our live bar. So basically the way it's going to work, we are going to split the lighting and the actual colors and patterns from the live bar, okay? To do that, we are going to right-click on the group and add a transparency mask. This transparency, this alpha mask, will correspond to our bar's alpha channel. So I invite you to select everything in the mask and to press delete to fill it with black. We can visualize our mask by isolating it, which I've done just right there. You can see that it's black. Everything we paint in white in the transparency mask is going to show in the group, okay? So I'm going to pick a brush in here that I've made, which is a sharp drawing brush, and I have to pick a white color in order to paint at 100% opacity. So in order to create that brush, you can pick one of the default presets for inking. Hold on, let me find one. I think I have one in here. Okay, the problem with the default preset is that they have this soft contour, and you want to get rid of that. So in order to do that, you go to the brush presets and you just set the fade to 1, to maximum, and it should kind of do the trick. Does it? It's still a bit soft. Okay, there's softness in here that was checked as well. So yeah, you uncheck the softness parameter and you set the fade value in the brush tip to the maximum, and it's going to give you a sharp finish. Now we are going to use the symmetry tools in order to draw our bar. And there are a few ways we can go. I'm going to show one trick, which is we can start by using a rectangle, the rectangle tool. Be sure that it's filled with the foreground color, which is white in that case, and without outlines. And then we just have to sketch our rectangle beyond the center of symmetry in here. And it's going to give us a symmetrical rectangle, all right, based on those symmetry axes. And then we can use our brush and the erase tool to create some kind of round corners that way, okay? All right. So this is one way to go. The other one is even more straightforward. We just paint with the actual brush. So like that, you know. And this method is going to give us a more organic feel. Note that I'm using weighted smoothing in here with a pretty high value in order to have clean outlines. Okay. And then you just have to zoom in a bit and improve, refine the actual silhouette. This can be an interesting pattern for our live bar. We can, you know, go and try to refine it. For instance, we can do it that way. Let us see. Okay. And you just have to play with the shape for a little while in order to get something that you like. So in here, I'm going to go with that. I think it's a decent bar. Let's see if I delete part of it. It's not the most beautiful bar contour, but it should do the trick. I'm going to scale it. Hold on. like that. A bit vertically, I'm scaling it down, and I'm going to go back and delete the added whites in the mask. Okay, so we have our mask, and the interesting thing about it is that from now on, whatever we paint in there is going to be hidden based on our mask. It acts a bit as a stencil, but the interesting part about it is that it's non-destructive. Now we have our base mask, we can do a variety of interesting things. For instance, we can nest other masks within the group. Here, I'm going to select the opaque pixels from the whole group. It's going to create a selection based on my transparency mask. I'm going to add a new group and shrink the selection in here. We can shrink it by something pretty small compared to the size of the document. Here, 12 pixels should be good. So I'm going to right click on the new group and add a transparency mask, and it's going to add a mask based on that selection, as you can see. So now within that nested group, everything I'm going to paint is going to stick in there, which means that I can use that to add, I can use that selection now. Local selection, where is that? Local selection. It's going to create a selection layer right now. And I can go back to my top group. I can invert it with Ctrl-Shift-I and add some kind of darker red in here, a bit more purple, for instance. Okay, and I can add some outline to my shape and use that one. You know, I can lock the alpha of that new layer of that outline and paint within the outline, just like that. Could even add some highlights to it. So the game of making live bars with bitmap tools is all about creating selections that you store and you manipulate in order to help you to make it faster to produce very precise shapes within your live bar. In order to shade our live bar, we have to think about two things. One is its 3D form, and the other one is the material it is made of. So the 3D form is something like its contour. For instance, it could be round like that and embedded within a frame that way. Or it could be what I'm going for in here, something like having a frame and it's going up, and here there's a sharp kind of bevel, and then it's relatively flat, slightly rounded, but not a lot. Again, a symmetrical bevel, and it's embedded in a small frame like this, something like that. So you can use the symmetry tool. In that case, is perfect to draw this kind of shape, even if it's not too precise, but the idea is to give you a sense of the elevation and the roundness of the bar. So I'm going to keep this layer on the side, move that as well, just like that. And we are going back to our live bar. And this kind of elevation means that we need a few passes for the lighting. For one, we need some kind of highlight, and the light is going to come from the top and a little bit from the bottom. So we need some highlight at the top. Then we need a really sharp, we need a sharper highlight, along the border of our live bar, and a softer equivalent here at the bottom. And we're going to need a sort of global, very soft light on top of the whole bar. And that's what we are going to start with. So I'm going to set the layer style to overlay, and it's going to be at the top of our bar in here. No, still in the group. All right. And I'm going to select the gradient tool, and I'm going to use the simple foreground color to transparent gradient. So I'm going to apply some highlight in here and a little bit at the bottom, just like that. And it's going to shade the outline as well and leave just a tiny bit of shadow right in here. So that's the kind of thing we can also do with a soft brush. It's very efficient to do it that way, especially with this preset, one of the basic ones, I believe. It adds some kind of grain which makes the bar look a bit more polished, natural, and modern. And we can always go in the middle and erase a bit of the highlights. So here, I'm going to keep it that way. Then when we want to do the highlight I've shown you, we have to go back, select the opaque pixels within the group, and again, shrink our selection. We're going to shrink it by something bigger now. I'm going to try 36. Yeah, it's perfect. Does the job. So I have to do two things. For one, I have to invert the selection for once and paint outside of the base selection in order to create the top and the bottom highlight. I'm going to pick an efficient brush for that, and again I'm going with some white that way. So don't worry, it can look a bit messy at first. I'm going to paint some highlights as well at the bottom and stay pretty soft. So the thing is, it can look messy at first. Then I'm going to apply a Gaussian blur that way to soften a bit that shading. And if it's rendering pretty fast, it's due to the fact that I'm on Krita animation beta, so I have the instant preview on. I'm going to set that to overlay just to see how it's working. It's doing a pretty good job. Okay, so I'm going to invert the selection and then I'm going to zoom in. It's very important because right now I need to do a more precise job. The next step is now to add some hard lighting. We are going to, again, select the opaque pixels in our group and shrink the selection, but with a higher amount than before, maybe 36 pixels in that case. Yeah, does the trick. So I am first going to invert that selection. Then I add a new layer and I ensure that, I'm painting outside of the initial selection. It's going to be a lighting layer, so I'm going to pick a white color again, and I'm going to set it to overlay again. And now it's up to you. I'm going to take that soft brush. Does it work? It's a bit too soft. By default, it's at 20% opacity, but I'm setting it back to 100% opacity, and I'm going to add some really strong highlights at the top and use the I key to lower the opacity. So it's I and O to tweak the opacity by default, and add some softer highlights at the bottom. And the interesting thing in here is that we can, I'm going to add that selection as a transparency mask within that layer. It's really where Krita shines. You can nest masks very easily. It works perfectly. You can always, switch to the eraser mode of the brush to remove a bit of lighting wherever you feel like you need to. I'm also going to change the background color because as the outline of our live bar is white, we can't really see it. So let's set it to something that's complementary to our bar, some darker blue. And you can see now we are starting to get something. I forgot to save the selection. So I'm going to rebuild it. In here, select opaque, select shrink selection. And well, you have to try to always think about the types of selections you want to store. You want to add transparency masks whenever you can. And the interesting thing in Krita is when you add a transparency mask, your selection is preserved. So you can add the transparency mask here, invert it, and it's already done in there, but you could add both transparency masks right away And then you can paint within your layer. I can kill that selection, and now I can paint right in there. So I'm going to do a few things. For one, I'm going to create a group and move that transparency mask to the group. Again, this will allow me to create multiple layers in here, because I'm going to add a layer of soft lighting at the very top of it, because the curvature of the top part of my lathe bar is not exactly the same as the bottom part and as, let's say, some kind of global curvature that we would have. So again, overlay mode. Overlay preserves the color that's below it, contrary to what normal does. And I'm going to add a new layer to add some sharper highlights. So in here, I'm going to pick this one brush, which gives me a bit of opacity, and I'm going to increase its opacity to 100%. So I'm modulating the opacity of the highlight using my brush. And I'm going to reactivate the smoothing as well in order to get cleaner lines. It's very important. UI elements, it's all based on how clean it looks. You know, if you want a polished aspect, basically you need precise shapes. That's also pretty important to paint with a pen tablet because of that. Another thing you could do is paint it real sharp with a completely opaque brush and then mask bits out. And remember, we have some lighting coming from the bottom, so we need some bottom highlight as well. Alright, so now I have my highlight. I'm going to mask out parts of it. So I right click on it, add a transparency mask again, and we get back to the same game of, you know, adding some black to it. Alright, a bit of black in here in order to soften the transition between the highlight and the actual bar. And if we look at our bar from afar, it's starting to look a bit better.